would like to welcome all of you to this very special evening. This evening, we are delighted to present an insightful interaction with the former chief of RAW, Amarjit Singh Dulat, around his recently launched memoir, Alive in the Shadows, published by HarperCollins. We are privileged to welcome our very eminent panelists and to briefly introduce them. Amarjit Singh Dulat is a former head of the Research and Analysis Wing, RAW, India's external intelligence agency. Dulat joined the Indian Police Service in 1965 and then the Intelligence Bureau in 1969, where he served for almost 30 years, where he headed the Kashmir Group during the turbulent 1990s until he joined and headed the RAW. After retirement, he was appointed as an advisor on Kashmir in the Prime Minister's office. Dulat is the author of two best-selling books. His first book, Kashmir, The Vajpayee Years, was published in the year 2015, followed by The Spy Chronicles and The Illusion of Peace in 2018. Let's put your hands together for Dulat, sir. E.S. Dulat will be in conversation with Jawhar Sircar, who has served as an Indian Administrative Service Officer for 41 years. Currently, he is a member of the Parliament of India who represents the state of West Bengal. He has published numerous articles and research papers on cultural, historical, and anthropological subjects for several years. Let's put our hands together for Jawhar, sir. I would now request my colleague Ritlina Sen to hand over a small token of acknowledgement to our speakers on behalf of Oxford Bookstores. On that note, without further ado, I will now hand over the session to our eminent panelists to take the conversation forward. Thank you.
You're the boss. Very good.
Let's take the mic.
Hello, doctor. In fact, I was in Parliament where they shut up our mics. Even then, you can hear that shindy while someone is going on speaking in the street in colorful jackets. Oh, Mr. Dulat, sir, it's an honor to have you here in Oxford, and I wish we had publicized that raw doesn't mean uncooked. It means the best of espionage. With that, Sircar and St. Xavier's would have actually much more that we could contain here. Now, I have gone through this book, and I find the earlier one as well, and I find something completely unofficer-like. It's my official complaint. He actually writes in a racy, readable language. In the early stages, we are taught how to write in bureaucraties, However, nevertheless, and that be so, maybe that, and thereafter, and nobody understands, not even we understand. But anyway, we write it. He writes in a very racy manner, very exciting manner, and it almost looks like reads like a spy thriller or a thriller. Number two, he has said that espionage is an unglamorous profession. When I compare his with mine, I feel like I was a dishwasher in Peeping restaurant or something. Did nothing other than push files. So it's been one of the most exciting jobs, the way he has recounted most happenings. I think Pranab Babu used to keep diaries. Pranab Mukherjee would keep diaries every night, and his usual time of meeting was around 2 o'clock in the morning. So his was, intellect by insomnia. So if you ever went to meet him, he'd say, "Tum do mujhe aa jao." And 2:30 he would say, "Let me write something." So I don't know how people can recall so many incidents. It's only after reading his book that I recall that I may also have had some incidents in my life which I can't figure out with whom and what's the name and what's the date. But then the characters he has dealt with are just the top of this range. From Atal Bihari Vajpayee at close quarters, we used to see him only at distance, duly ensured by the SPG, the same SPG that could not protect either two prime ministers. But never mind. So we'll be keeping it a safe distance. He has worked with them. He has had the benefit of knowing a lot of people. His earlier book reveals his stand on Kashmir, which I found most endearing. Because, we are taught not to have views. And not to have views is not to think at all. And that is a very endearing quality in the bureaucracy. You give up your thinking capabilities, and after 40 years, when they give you retirement, you go and ask, shall I have my thinking process back, if any, rusted? But he has been able to retain all of it. Having said that, I would request him to first tell us, this one is more autobiographical and covers a long sweep. The first part would be very interesting to those who are in love with politics, society, and the structure of North and West India. For somebody in Kolkata who would like to know how life was in Chandigarh, in Shimla, in Delhi, and others during those times, especially after the partition, he has vivid memories of what happened after the partition. I have only read. So this sort of a recounting would also give you a chance, would also give you a peek into what the elite schools and colleges of what I meant to term as North India was and is still continues. Still continues. They have this thing saying, my son was once there, so he asked, he picked up a swagger in exactly 3 days' time. He said, I will say fair name, who the hell are you? That sort of thing. So I had to tell him who I am, your dad, and you, but anyway, never mind. So we live in this period when you lived, this generation that I see in front of me, we were terrified of our fathers, weren't we? Yeah. And then we became terrified of our sons. We have a terror on both sides. Now, I would ask Mr. Dulat to give us the first view as to why he chose the framework first. The framework starts from his early schooling days, post-partition days, his very interesting relationship that led to marriage. And I found a very interesting parallel. He says his wife couldn't care a damn about what he was in service. I fully agree. I wish I could bring my wife. My wife doesn't even know after 41 years what's the difference between a video and an SDO. And if I tell her, she says, I couldn't care less. But that is indeed a very, very desirable trait. Because more dangerous than the IAS or IPS officer is the Mrs. IAS and Mrs. IPS. I find them so obnoxious that I wish I had more of Begam's trait. But never mind. So we start with the author himself explaining why he chose the subject and the crux of the repertoire.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Let me start by thanking and congratulating Oxford for its 100 years. And I can never thank Mana enough. Thank you for getting me here. It's very kind of you. Every time I've asked you, I've fallen in love with you because every time I asked you, you said, I'll do my best. And you do more than your best. So,
you are not the first person to fall in love with her.
And then course, I have to thank you, Jawhar. I mean,
Just copy one.
no, I was humbled actually when I called you up. And I had spoken to Derek earlier, and he said he was going to be busy. And he suggested your name, and the moment I called you, it's very rare that you responded so spontaneously. You said, yeah, if the dates are all right, I'll do it. And here we are sitting, like old friends. So it's wonderful. It's always wonderful to be in Calcutta. I mean, people here may not believe, but I've been coming here since the age of 12 when I was a kid. I first came here in February 1953, and since then I've been coming here almost every year or every second year now. I had an uncle here, a cousin sitting here, and uncle whom we loved very dearly, so he kept pulling us to Calcutta. And then, as luck would have it, my sister got married and also came and settled in Calcutta for about 30 years. So there's been a great attachment with Calcutta, and believe it or not, we came here for our honeymoon. And people are very surprised when I said we went to Calcutta for our honeymoon, because that's all we could afford. We caught the Kalka mail from Delhi, arrived here, and then everything was free. And I was telling somebody we spent a week at my uncle's place, who was very kind to give us a room. In the last 5 days, with my sister, who had a little flat in Dover Road, and she was equally kind and made us sleep on the ground. So that's how simple and enjoyable, but it was great fun, and we've always had fun in Calcutta. And I think back to the late 50s and early 60s. What I miss in Calcutta, since we are on Park Street, is the skirts outside. I'm told the Anglo-Indians have gone, the Chinese have gone. I don't know who's gone or not, but the skirts should never have left Calcutta. And I can still remember Pam Crane singing at, there used to be a place called El Dorado, and the jam sessions in Sircar. Yeah, Calcutta has been a great place. Coming to the book, all these books have happened accidentally, except for the first. The first happened deliberately because my head was stuffed with Kashmir. And I gave it more than 10 years, and then I had to get it out of my head. So that's how it occurred. And when I went to the publishers and said, I'm writing a book, they said, what about? I said, Kashmir. Even everybody knows Kashmir. And then they suggested a better title, and they said we'd call it the Vajpayee years. We worked with Vajpayee. And the book did very well, and I think it would be the best title it could have. And Jawhar mentioned Atalji. I had the privilege of working closely with him for 5.5 years. Wonderful human being. One learned a lot from him. But he was not as simple as he looked. He was a poet, he was a philosopher. But there was a Chanakya in him also. So he was a very savvy politician. I only wish, when I think back, because I saw him as foreign minister in Kathmandu in 1978. What a fantastic foreign minister he looked then. I used to think that instead of old Morarji, if Atal Bihari Vajpayee had been Prime Minister in 1978, what a fantastic Prime Minister he would have made. Unfortunately, when I got to know him better, he become more cautious. And that is why he allowed Gujarat to happen. He suffered those moments of weakness. This book has happened accidentally, like the Spy Chronicle. This one, actually, we have a literary agent. He's very active all over the country, but I've known him for some time. I've never needed him. But he came home one day, exactly about a year ago. And he said, Dulat Sahab, you have to write 2 books in the next 4 months. I said, what are you talking about? What am I to write? He said, write a memoir to begin with. He said, I've already done that. Last 5 years was a memoir. He said, Kashmir ko chhodiye. Talk about your own life. So this is my own life. It's not an autobiography, sir, but it's vignettes from my life. Arbitrarily picked people I remember, those who I remember more fondly I've talked about. And so that's how this book came about. Uh, there's an epilogue in the book, which actually I wanted as the introduction, but my editor would not have it. She said the beginning is so good that I don't want you to meddle with it. So we'll put it as an epilogue. Then I sat down. It took me 4 or 5 days to think it out, and I wrote that epilogue. And she said to me, when I gave it to her, she said, "You've done philosophical now." I said, "I don't know." But that epilogue, in a nutshell, is my life. You know, if nobody has time to read the whole book, I would recommend the epilogue because that's what I think about life, and that's what life has been for me, and the way I've sort of lived it also. But gradually, so you maintain a diary and all that. I've never maintained a diary. My wife complains I'm the most disorganized guy. I can't even keep my shirts in the right place. And whenever I've been writing, she says, "What is this mess that you create? You throw paper all over the room." Because I normally sit in the bedroom and write. And I write everything longhand because I've never learned to use a computer. So I do these jottings and then the jottings come together. And most of my thinking I've done while on a walk alone. And sometimes when I get to think positively, then I walk a little longer to think more. And sometimes I think in the middle of the night when I can't sleep. And I even then quietly make a jotting or two. And you try and connect these things. As I've said in the epilogue, I think the book starts a bit late and ends a bit early. Said it sort of arbitrarily. But I quite enjoyed doing it. And I thought to myself, if I have to write a book, then I've got to trace my ancestry and put it down in a book so that maybe our children or great grandchildren will know where we came from or what we were all about. And let me put it like this, that we were from a very feudal family. But my father put an end to all that feudalism. He was a very practical man. And he was very much against these Rajas and Maharajas that we were related to. And so that's how I learned about life. I learned a lot in school, although boarding school is a lonely place, but and in our days it was soon after partition. So there were a lot of English boys and we used to get bullied a lot. But still one learned it was survival of the fittest. But I learned a couple of things that I can never forget. One is that if you believe in doing good, then keep doing good. And it doesn't matter who gets the credit for it. Connected to that was that if you do any wrong, put your hand up and own up. You know, I did it. I'm sorry. And don't tattle on anybody. Don't talk about anybody negatively. So these are things which have stayed with me. And there's a little anecdote in this book which people can laugh at. Because there was a schoolmate of mine who joined the service. We joined the service together. He was a year junior in school, but we joined the service together. We were training in Mount Abu together. And the crux of that little anecdote is that we were caught drinking, and Mount Abu was a dry place, so it was very difficult to come by liquor. Either you got it from the Gurkha battalion there, or you got it. A tourist could get liquor with a permit. Or you went down to the bus stand and asked the tourist to buy you 6 bottles of beer. In this particular case, we couldn't get anything, so we went down to the market, and there was a Sardar there who always had thara. So we bought a bottle of thara, 4 of us or so, and one guy got drunk and got sick in the mess. So there was hell to play the next day. The adjutant or the assistant commandant, who was an Anglo-Indian gentleman called Burge, was very angry. And he said, I know you bastards who you are, and I will fix you. So my friend Arun Baba, who was in school with me, I went to Arun and I said, Arun, I feel very uncomfortable about this whole thing. Why don't we just go and own up and go and tell him? And Arun said, we've gone mad. This is not Bishop Cotton School. You hear, you go and own up, you'll be dismissed. So I kept quiet. Next day I sat in the class, but I was very uncomfortable. So just before lunch, I got out of my seat and went to Burge's room, which was just outside the classroom. Knocked on his door and he said, come in, you bastard. So you finally decided to own up? I said, yeah, I'm sorry. And he said, what about your friend? I said, for sure he'll be here in the next 5 minutes. Then I went back and told Arun, I said, go and apologize. I've already done it. So the cat is out of the bag. Go and apologize. And he went and apologized. And we became, after that, we became Burge's favorites. We were his 2 favorites right through the year. So that's how life can be. I think I've said enough for starters, sir.
Small incident actually brings in a lot about the type of schooling we are destroying nowadays. I remember when in school, when people were in a mischievous mood, and then the whole class would get punished, but nobody would own up. Nobody would tackle. Tackling is something, it's just not on. You don't hit an adversary who's down, give him his sword and let him get up and then kill the son of a bitch. That sort of a thing. Now, I'll come, you have mentioned very colorful characters from Ranveer Singh to Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Rajesh Mishra. I wish I had a little more of Rajesh Mishra as well, because it's quite enigmatic. You have seen the transition of India in the post-independence era to what we now call a mature state of coordinated autocracy. We now have, and you can use democracy if you want, they are interchangeable now. Now, whatever it is, you've seen that. On Kashmir, I have always felt, it's a very personal feeling for someone who spent so little time in Kashmir, that we are behaving like an occupation force. I am not mincing words. We are behaving like an occupation force. Whatever be the morality or the politics behind it, the fact is the real situation is that we are seen as an occupation. Now, a whole generation may come up soon that has no memories of the earlier Azadi or whatever they have, and may start accepting. But the present state of manufactured peace, do you think it can last? It's a different matter altogether that there was no reaction to the snatching away of whatever paper autonomy they had. It had whittled down. They had a paper autonomy, but it had whittled down. We know that. We were all conspiratorial in whittling it down by bits and pieces. But that was a very British way. You do it subtly. You don't use a sledgehammer all the time, hit Pawan Khera on the head and say that you must apologize and things like that. Okay, now on Kashmir, you know much more. and you have written as much in your earlier book and in this book as well. But this book you have focused more on, let us say, the characters, more on Farooq Abdullah and other players, Shah Shabir and other players. But I am asking you, sir, for an overview. Do you think the piece is tenuous, or do you think the absorption, complete absorption, homogenization of a part of autonomous India will actually win? I mean, I don't mind saying I'm a loser in thinking. It was coming up in bits and pieces, the movement towards accepting India, let's put it. Now, one can always turn around and say, what the hell, they're very much part of India, why won't they accept and all that? I'm not getting to the logic, I'm getting into the sensitivity that I've seen even in my last film. They refer to us as Hindustan. Do you really think that they'll be able to put it through? I mean, if they do, I'll be equally glad. That sensitivity is not standing there, to be able to pull it through. It's reached the stage of finality, okay. But if they can't put it through, do we have an Israel and Hamas and West Bank on our shores? That's
Well, actually, Kashmir has been an obsession with me. A lot of people think I'm a Kashmiri. Some people think I served there a long time. And actually, I was there for a little less than 2 years. But I kept working on Kashmir somehow. And even after I finished with government, finished with the PMO in 2004, um, Kashmir doesn't let go of me, or I won't let go of Kashmir. So it's an obsession. I've been watching Kashmir. My reaction to 370 was that there was no need to abrogate it, but I suppose it was in the BJP manifesto and they had to do it. And they timed it beautifully after the 2019 elections when they were riding very high. So at that time I spoke against it, I wrote against it also. But the Kashmiri is many things and he's adaptable also. Now, since 2019, first to answer the other question you raised, that, I was told the government of India feared a huge uprising, but there was no uprising. And I spoke to some of the youngsters in the city, and they said, now nobody talks. We talk in whispers. And the Kashmiri has decided not to die cheap. So I thought that made a lot of sense. And in course of time, I can say that the Kashmiri is reconciled to 370 having gone. It's gone, dusted, it's not going to come back. He understands that. Issue now, if there is an issue, and there is an issue, the issue is statehood. And I think that troubles not only the valley, but Jammu as well. And Government of India has promised statehood back in Parliament. But whenever the question is raised, they say we'll do it when we think best. So God knows when that's going to happen. But actually 370 was over in my mind in 1975 when Sheikh Saab entered into an accord with Indira Gandhi. Almost everything was conceded then, and Sheikh also said that accession was irrevocable. So there was not much left. It was a fig leaf. My argument was that why remove this fig leaf last fig leaf of dignity, the way the Kashmiri thinks and feels. Now, yes, we have been using strong arm tactics, muscular policy, and I'm not one who has ever advocated anything like that, but I must admit it's working. It's worked. What we call militancy has come down. various reasons. Also due to the muscular policy. How long it will succeed, that time will tell. It's very difficult to say, answer that question. But more importantly, to sum up Kashmir in not too many long sentences, I think what is being lost in Kashmir is the idea of India. We lost the spirit of India long ago. After Pandit Nehru, the spirit of India had gone. After Vajpayee, I feel I give a lot of credit to Dr. Manmohan Singh. He was a gentleman's gentleman. But gradually, we have lost the idea of India. So I think Rahul Gandhi, whatever his motivations may have been, has done a great service to India in bringing back, in promoting the idea of India. When he went and unfurled the national flag at Lal Chowk, it needed some doing. And there were a lot of Kashmiris who were worried that he might be attacked, that he might be blown up like his father, or somebody might shoot him. But nothing of the sort happened. And Kashmiris came out in huge numbers. There were crowds, particularly when he walked from, if those who are familiar with Kashmir, from Kazikund to Anantnag, there were huge crowds. And when I saw one of those photographs, I said, I haven't seen anything like this or heard of anything like this since Sheikh Saab's time. I don't think the Abdullahs today can muster so many people. So it was incredible. And I know a girl at the university there who's always been pro-Pakistan. And she said to me that, can't believe this. When she saw the brother and sister together, she found it so touching. And she said, if only we had to deal with people like this. And the day that Rahul spoke in Srinagar, actually it was raining snow. It was snowing so heavily. But he stood there in a firan, not in a t-shirt. He wore a firan that day. He made a concession to himself and stood in the snow and spoke. So I think that's the only time in recent years that the idea of India has been promoted in Kashmir. And I'm willing to guarantee Modi ji, if he were to go to Srinagar and announce just two things, that statehood will be restored and elections will be held in the next 3 months. He could travel in an open jeep in Srinagar without any security, and boys will rush out to garland him. That is the kind of sentiment that you've come across in Kashmir. Most Indians who are not familiar with Kashmir, some have never been there, some go there to party, enjoy, to go to Gulmarg. But if you start interacting with a Kashmiri, you will find that however big a rascal he may be, he's the kindest and gentlest of rascals. So that's how I look at it. It's very difficult to predict the future. But there are things that I keep saying at times that the solution to Kashmir is staring us in the face. If only we want to move forward. When I say the solution, actually there is no solution to Kashmir. There will never be a full and final settlement on Kashmir, because that third party will always be a party to Kashmir. But when I say there will be a solution, I mean that we could have peace for 12 to 15 years, which would be a big thing. And right now, I agree with you, sir, there's a sense of hopelessness there. And it's very sad. I was there last summer. I try and go every summer or every spring. And when you hear the Kashmiris speak, it's sad.
I hope I raised this issue not because I'm pro-insurrection, pro-terrorism or anything. I raised this issue because Kashmir is a metaphor for it. The tolerance that got all of us together, the tolerance that was shattered when they massacred the Kashmiri Pandits. They're all there, they're all part of the same transaction that's going on. But a sensitivity, a healing touch, the healing touch as we talk about, because we've got to keep them together with a healing touch, with an understanding, by saying, I'm with you. Now, moving on, you've come across so many colorful characters, and one who fascinated people in Calcutta would be M.K. Narayanan. M.K. Narayanan was famous for his statement, I've got a dossier on you. तो ज़्यादा बात मत करो. So that's the thing. I don't think he ever said it, but that was what we said about him. Now, I happen to know him from my Delhi days when I used to frequent the PMO for the reason that Prime Minister used to deal with my files, and I was getting undue importance for absolutely no fault of mine. Now, Mr. Narayanan was a regular feature there, and we traveled together. He was here, and as you said, one of the finest officers in intelligence India has ever produced. We have seen him as the governor, and as governors used to be, you know what I mean, not involved parties, not SMS tweeters of an intemperate variety, but a governor is a governor, yeah, देखने से खुश लगता है, that sort of thing. Now, we have seen him, and we had also had the privilege of having a very, very dignified governor in Mr. Gopal Krishna Gandhi. So they remain as high water marks for that fancy house on which audit objections are still going on. You don't know that house was built without proper permission, so the audit got after them. The same way they got after Taj Mahal. The governor should get type 9, type 10 flat, should be yellow in its color, green in the windows, things like that. So, on Mr. Narayanan, you have worked with him directly. I saw him as a third party. We all saw him actually. Some saw him more and some saw him less. But we all were. So, does intelligence actually impact the thinking of a person? I mean, here I mean intelligence not in the form of the form that you really use. I mean intelligence in the form of, let us say, gathering information. Because we found, Mr. Dulat, we found that several officers in IB, Intelligence Bureau, were very, very cagey and used to talk like note sheets. How are you? I'm fine, but weather permitting and all that. I mean, they're scared of something. I remember one of my colleagues at the IPS warning me not to speak so much into that phone. I said, yeah, since you have heard it, you might as well hear the rest of it. So the first question is on Mr. Narayan, and the second question I'll ask you, you can answer them together. You have said that you have to penetrate every organization and every service. How much of it, I mean, now that I'm not covered under the Official Secrets Act anymore, thank God, and I can speak my mind almost. I did some and I got into trouble now also, but never mind. So, how much of it is to, in the sense that do officers, are they really spied upon? Blunt word, are they really spied upon? I know that their loyalties and others, some of it needs to be checked once in a while, this thing. But despite all the check, we have the biggest thugs in government getting promotions out of town. Even now, after all the 360 and 480 and whatever they call it, third-rate parties that are getting in. The absolute should have been Anyway, please.
So, I never worked directly with Mr. K. Narayan, but I was always somewhere around him here and there. In fact, we say my wife got along with him better than I did. But I had the privilege when I joined the bureau of sharing a room with him. And he was the most senior assistant director in the bureau at that time, just waiting to get promoted. And I was the junior most. But we shared a room because he was the communism chief, you would say, the doyen of communism. And I was put on a communist desk, which incidentally happened to be West Bengal. In those days, Rajya Mukherjee was the chief minister here. So I watched the master operate next to me. I mean, he didn't talk too much to me. Only when he found that I was upset about something, he would say, "What happened again? That fellow's giving you grief again?" And I would say, "Yeah, he is." So he looked after youngsters. He was good. And but it was a great learning for me in the first 2 years. And quite often, having come from a subdivision in Rajasthan, where you were almost a master of all you surveyed, in the sense that after 5:30 you could go and shoot partridges. And here you sat in office from 10 to 8, and I said, where have I got stuck? This is a terrible place. Sometimes I felt like running away. But then I said, I have nowhere to go. I mean, I can't go back to the state, it will be in disgrace. And one has to stick it out. One learned in 2 years. Normally we spent 2 to 3 years at headquarters, but I did 4 years. 2 years in the communist government and 2 years in the rightist group. The first one was worse, more difficult. More difficult people to work with. We had the great Mr. A.K. Dave, who was never satisfied with the draft. And I remember one particular holiday, a Sunday, when he brought us into office and made us redraft the whole day. He used to get a kick out of it. And, he was a very, very tough taskmaster. And then I moved to the other side, and the taskmaster there was in some ways even tougher. But I learned more from him because he never threw a draft back at you. If he didn't like what you've written, he'll say, sit down here. Now I'll tell you how this should have been written. And he would dictate it in your presence. And therefore you learn. The other thing was that he had this very tough exterior. Actually, he was a very soft human being. I remember once there was a very serious of ours, assistant director, who had been asked to look after elections. And elections came under this gentleman, Mr. K.N. Prasad. And Iyer, who is the assistant director, was used to get nervous very quickly. And every time he walked into Prasad's room, he would sort of shiver that he didn't know what's going to happen. And Prasad said to me after he walked away, he said, I think this fellow will get a heart attack. Why have they sent him here? Every time he comes into my room, it looks like he's going to cry. And you come into my room and I shout at you and you smile. So I said, sir, I know what you're all about. But one learned a lot in those 4 years. And for us youngsters, Mr. Narayan always hovered around us, somewhere or the other. He was always there. I mean, when he became DIB, I got a message. I was in Bhopal then, enjoying myself thoroughly. And I got a message saying that Mr. Narayanan would like you in his office. Are you willing to come to headquarters? I said, no, I haven't completed my stint yet. Because I knew what that would mean. And also, I always enjoyed the outstations more because whatever little autonomy you had in an outstation. So I stuck on in Bhopal, and then Narayanan sent me to Kashmir. And I owe a lot to him because whatever I became after that was because of my posting to Kashmir. I don't think I would have ever headed anything. I don't think I would have ever gone to the PMO. I don't think I would have been anything if I had not gone to Kashmir. So I owe a whole lot to Kashmir and also to Mr. Narayan. Sending me and looking after us. Of course, he was the Edgar Hoover who would say, parties and all, I have a file on you.
Yeah.
Be careful, huh?
File on you.
That was his sort of way of joking, particularly with ladies. I know who you are, I've got a file on you. But he really came into his elements and enjoyed himself with Rajiv Gandhi. Rajiv was new. He was fascinated by intelligence, and he was fascinated by his intelligence chief, whom he would call for coffee every night at 11 and give him coffee and chocolates. And it was a great relationship. And I can say without any hesitation that no other Prime Minister in India has supported the agencies as much as Rajiv did. So there was a special relationship there. We've had Prime Ministers like Narasimha Rao who had no interest in Pankaj you're showing me. What rubbish are you bringing me? But Rajiv was different.
What about the question about how much are we piled upon?
Yeah, okay.
I got a chance, sir. I don't meet the head of the IP or the head of the RAW for the wrong
No, I
purpose.
think there's a huge exaggeration about this business of being spied upon. The government is only interested in people who are in very sensitive jobs. Like if you are working for the Atomic Energy Commission, and of course officers who join the bureau or who join the RNAW, their antecedents are vetted or verified. But I have to admit, even there we don't do a very good job of it because a lot of people have sneaked in.
I know many of them have been exported without permission to the US and other places. No, I wish I'd met you 10, 15 years ago. So,
I wish I had 30 years.
no, sir, वो क्या है कि but the way they used to terrorize me while I was in service, यार तो इतना बात बोलो, you get into problems. You can't call Rahul an idiot. I said, but that's not covered under the official secret time. चलो कोई बात नहीं. So we had fun times. It's a very dull job. Now, one you had dealt with counterintelligence, which means finding out spies within the organization, and you had also spoken about APS Gill and the elimination operation, the absolute liquidation of enemies. You know something? I'm a student of Presidency College 69 to 72, the worst period of the Naxalite violence, and it scarred me. You can't be politically active and not be affected. Whatever it is, having said that, at some point of time you take an adversarial position, you get bashed for it, you get hospitalized for it, okay. But the way they were eliminated by something called Operation Steeplechase by the Indian Army, I'm not mentioning it in public, by the Calcutta police that had just had enough of their colleagues being stabbed to death and with, and killed with pipe guns, and they used to carry a shawl And as they moved past the policeman, they would just take a dagger and rip him through. We've gone through that whole period, but the counter operation is something we don't talk about. There are some issues we don't talk about. So the next generation doesn't even know that how many hundreds of young men of Calcutta were tied to the lamppost in Baranagar and shot in cold blood at 3-inch interval. How many of them were killed in Chanditala? And these are the two places that mainly went through. You were not ever actively involved in such acts of barbaric necessity, perhaps. But you know about the KPS Gill side. Now there are again whispers. Pakistan thing is not ever dying down. It's still kept in whispers. And the way it grew, we have seen it. We were drafted for elections, Punjab and all that, we've gone over it. Do you think that, of course, it's difficult, it's easy, I mean, you've already stated that you believe in the more human touch. But do you think that terrorism as such, or violence against the state, can only be dealt with by counter-violence of the state? It's a question I've not been able to answer because it's happening in Chhattisgarh, it's happening in many other places even now. The counter-violence of the state is something on which, having worked and earning my pension for having worked with the state, with the state machinery, one feels a little difficult to accept. Not being a part of it is one thing, but difficult to accept. What is your, I mean, at a distance, you're now 80, 81, I guess. What would your view be?
My view has been quite consistent, sir, that I believe that no insurgency can be put down by force. It's very, very rare. You can take, as you said, revenge for revenge, or whatever people tying them to lampposts and this, that, and the other. But Naxalism hasn't gone away from the country. Might shift from here to there to somewhere else. But in all these years, we haven't been able to end Naxalism. And there's a very interesting book I would recommend to everybody who is interested in the subject. There's a gentleman in London, I met him a few times, I know him quite well, Jonathan Paul. He's written a book called Talking to Terrorists. And he makes this point that everybody talks. And that's the only way to go forward. That's the only way out. Because insurgencies have never been put down by force. Now, in some ways, I was, in fact, you mentioned 72, so I was out by then. But 69 to 71, actually, I was looking into Bengal. And I visited Calcutta in 70, and a lot of these things were happening then. I also, in that summer, went to Siliguri, where things I found were much worse. Much more tension there, because those were the days of Sharu Mazumdar and Kanu Sanyal. And people were so petrified in Srinagar that after sunset, some of them put chains across their houses and locked themselves in. And there was no place to stay there was no place to eat there. I used to go to the railway station, inquire about when the next train was coming, and then get whatever I put to eat at that time. Those were bad days, but I was out of this Bengal desk when these killings and massacres that you talked about happened. So I don't have any proper knowledge. I've heard about it. And it happened in the Punjab also. But the thing is that it doesn't end the problem. Because I believe Naxalism is a socio-economic problem. You have to deal with it that way. And there are people who spend a lifetime, working for peace, working on engagement. And people talk about the Israeli service, Mossad. And I can tell you that my contemporary, Ephraim Halevi, used to say very openly, he says that there's no way we can fight Hamas. The only way is to engage with Hamas. It cannot be, no, it cannot. It cannot be cowed down and it cannot be demolished or finished otherwise. And he was not the only head of Mossad. I think there were 5 or 6 who thought the same way. And there's that woman in Britain, what was her name? She had a long double-barreled name, Elizabeth Muller. And she said that she advocated talking to Al-Qaeda actually. So I always believe that talking is the only way out. And if you read the Kashmir book, it ends with talking, talking, talking. Please keep talking. And in the process, I've met some very, very fascinating people. You mentioned the Pandit problem. Let me talk about it for a minute or two. This movie came out, the Kashmir Files, and I refused to see it because I knew what it's all about. It's full of propaganda. The thing is, yes, Kashmiri Pandits were killed. They were targeted. But many, many more Muslims were killed than Kashmiri Pandits. But it just created a stir, it created a scare, and I don't blame the Pandits for leaving because I was there in that winter. It was terrible. Every time I went out of my home, I didn't know if I'd come back or not. And it was a very lonely place. There was nobody there. There was no army there. There was no BSF there. There was hardly any CRPF. And there was nobody to cope with the problem. But, and actually, that's where I learned my first lesson. That this thing will never end with a gun. Gun for gun is not going to solve the problem. Punjab was an exception because KPS Gill was an exceptional police officer. I would rate him as one of our finest. But Rajesh Pilot once suggested to me or asked me, what if we were to send KPS Gill to Kashmir? I said, don't do it, sir. Kashmir is very different from Punjab. Kashmiri is much more sensitive and he will not take this, he will not tolerate this. And interestingly, when the suggestion was made to Gill, Rajesh suggested he go there as governor, and he said, there's no point sending me as governor. I have to go and hack the J&K police if you want me to produce results. And we had a very smart governor in those days, General Krishna Rao. When he heard of it, he quickly appointed the person he hated the most as the He said Savarwal will be DG. Matter ended there. So, yeah, but Punjab also left its scars behind. You mentioned Khalistan. Now all these things get exaggerated. The word Khalistan, it's used mostly by the diaspora. Let me try and explain it or rationalize it like this. That in Punjab now, when people talk about Khalistan, actually what they are expressing is that the Punjab should get its due. And Punjab is an extremely sensitive state. Sometimes I feel it's more sensitive because I belong there. I can sense it, that it is more sensitive even than Kashmir. And what will happen in the future, because this government is thoroughly incompetent, the state government. The other lesson we must learn is that these sensitive states cannot and should not be governed from Delhi. So Kejriwal cannot govern Punjab from Delhi.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember you mentioning about Pam Crane. People have heard about it, those with white hair or no hair. It'll grow, I'm being assured. Go back. Here, this particular streak is an evidence that I would like to put forward before youngsters. After 68, everything disappeared. No pram crane, no Dido room, no Usha Uttapa, the trinkers. Everything that was viewed as ostentatious, as Western imperial, just disappeared. A lot of things, people would go home as early as possible. Even wayward kids in college would go home as early as possible. And the mothers would wait with panted breath to see the last member come in before they bolted the door. The nights were terrible. You could hear gunshots, you could hear bombs, and we learned to distinguish the sound of a bomb from the sound of a shot. So that was a period. So we bounced back, just like Kashmir has bounced back, but we completely aborted that part of the life of Calcutta. Park Street was, let us say, went through its own operations. Not the same. It's not. It can't be the same Park Street ever again. What it was. Anyway, never mind. We remember. I was going through your book, and what fascinated me most was the relationship between IB, your mother cadre, so to say, and the RAW. It's always been a strained relationship. We know it. It's always been strained, and I don't know whether the information is exchanged periodically. But how do you feel, because you are basically an IB person being posted to RAW? So you have three disqualifications where RAW is concerned. Number one, you didn't belong to the RAW administrative service, the RAS. B, you were IPS, which made it even worse. And C, you had come from the IB. The fact that you put up your own stand to Shamal Datta is a different thing. But the fact is that the two services, and you mentioned about the RAS, the raw service, getting what is called a raw deal all through. It's got a raw deal all through. But then we have the horror stories of espionage experts switching side, going off here, going off there. I don't know, but how could you adjust? Because you would be viewed with suspicion. You would be viewed with suspicion and a little bit of angst by the people of the. Do you feel that it should be a completely integrated service? Because then it will inherit the myopia of a service, even the IAS suffers from a myopia that is very difficult to contain. It soon becomes genetic. आप सब कुछ जानते हैं. They say that wives can cure you of this fallacy that you know everything because they know everything.
Absolutely. And okay, let me pick up the RNAW first. I got there purely by accident. I was to retire in '98, and then Government of India decided to extend the retirement age from 58 to 60. So we got 2 years extra. Ours was a very particularly lucky batch, and suddenly all of us became chiefs. Shaul became chief in the IB. We are from the same batch, but he's a slot above me. And then it was Shaul who got me this job in the RNAW. There was a sort of a vacancy there, and they were looking for somebody. And Shaul, who had a particularly good relationship with Brajesh and with the family, he got me there. I've always been mystified whether he wanted to push me out or whether he wanted to. I've said it to his face. I had said, I'm very grateful you got me this job. Going to the RNAW was not easy. I spent 2 years there, thoroughly enjoyed myself, very proud to have served in the RNAW. And at the end of 2 years, and today more so, because a lot of time has passed, I don't think I ever became one of the RLW. It's a pity. And this is I'm admitting it myself. Because when I joined, there was a lot of hostility, and it was understandable. Where has this fellow come from? Who the hell is he? Then somehow, gradually, people began to accept. And by the time I took over, or soon after I took over, because I was chief only for 17 months, I think people began to feel that this guy is not such a bad guy. And I was told very flatteringly, you brought a whiff of fresh air to the organization. Everybody is very happy. Yeah, that hostility ended, and I had a good relationship there, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself there. I felt like one of them. And whenever the matter came up, even if it was between my old organization and the RLAW, I stood very firmly for the RLAW. In fact, there was a lot of talk that this guy has come from the IB, now he's going to bring all his favorites from the IB. And some of the youngsters came and were keen to join the RLAW. I said, no, go back to your organization. Now I'm chief here. This is not the IB, this is the RLAW. And I'll stand by the RLAW. And I stood for the RLAW. In fact, my cabinet secretary Prabhat Kumar asked me exactly this question before he was demitting office, that you were the only one who served in both organizations. Which do you think is the better organization? I said, well, the IB is an older organization, more than 100 years old. It's much more solid, much more cohesive. But man to man, person to person, I would say the RLW can match anything. And I've said wherever I've gone all over the world that ours is a very, very good organization. And people who read that book, The Spy Chronicles, I got Asad Durrani to say that you guys are professionally better than us. So, which is a huge, huge compliment.
Better than the ISI. I don't mean the one in Baranagar, the one station in Pakistan. So,
yeah,
get them to agree. And one of the reasons for Kashmir not blowing up right now in Pakistan is in absolutely no shape to go and finger anybody else. So, we'll round up, because it's been a very interesting conversation we have had. You had such an interesting time. What the hell was I doing pushing files anyway? So you were with even Indira Gandhi at close range, and the nearest I got was shot 4 feet away. You had been supervising the visits of Prince Charles. Well, I feel good because he's duller than me. King Charles now. Surely I found someone. Now, but you never got Diana, na? Huh? That's a
I only
pity.
heard that he was meeting a woman and my parachute, but there was no Diana.
No Diana. No, that's a pity. That's a pity.
That he was more exciting at that time.
He was going with that.
I must tell you this little Calcutta story. I went around 12 days with him, and we had a ball actually. He traveled all over India, and his last stop was Calcutta. From here he went to Kathmandu. And he was very scared of Calcutta. He said, will there be communist protests? Will this happen? Will that happen? He said, nothing will happen. You will get a better turnout in Calcutta than you got anywhere else. He said, are you sure? He said, I'm sure. When he came here, Lord Swaraj Paul had put up big hoardings for him. I said, look. He said, but this is Swaraj Paul. I said, you watch. And as we went through Calcutta, there were more and bigger crowds.
The emotional Bengalis. Hyper emotional Bengali.
Hyper emotional Bengalis. I'll come to that in a moment. Sorry, I'm not finishing this because he brought me to Charles and to Calcutta. At one stage, I said to him, I said, look, Your Highness, look at the crowds you. He said, you know, Mr. Dulat, you sit in that front seat with your dark glasses on. Sometimes I feel they're cheering you. I said, no, no, no. Not at all. They're cheering you. But he went away a very happy man. And that's what Calcutta does. Also, let me add here, since Jawhar mentioned Park Street and you know how we've demolished the old this thing, that if there are brown Saab still to be found anywhere in the country,
It's here.
it is here, sir, it is here. In the Bengal Club, exactly. Not the brown, but the other day or other night we were having dinner or lunch, I forget now. So I told my wife, I was looking at a gentleman having lunch, perfect gentleman, in every way. And I said to her, I said, do you remember what we were taught in school? That when you eat with your mouth shut. I said, but none of us do it. I'm seeing this gentleman, he hasn't opened his mouth at all. He's chewing away slowly with his mouth totally shut. And it's true. You find brown Saabs here. We used to think we had brown Saabs in the Punjab, but I think they ended with my father-in-law.
Yes. Well, we have others also who emit sound from both the throat and from somewhere else. We have that part also. But then I end up my part by saying that I kept on saying you're lucky because when you were taking Charles around and I was moving around in writer's building and I accosted two communist indoctrinated employees union who never worked, only talked. So they looked at my suit and one told the other, my God, thank God we were not big officers, we would not have to wear such suits in summer. The other said, you don't know, they're inviting the British. So yes, the last time they did, they took 180 years to go. So that's a bit of Calcutta that keeps it alive. With this, we went to writer's building and I came in from a wrong side, so they asked me, they didn't believe I was an officer. So I did a lot of convincing and somebody from behind looked over and so they didn't bada officer hai. So I was allowed. So the guy before me, he had asked the cop, what are you doing? So I'm checking. But that's my chana that my wife gave me. What are you checking? He said, we're looking for, don't you know? They are planting, go to plant RDX in writer's building. Fellow looked and said, Gavaxin will do. That is Calcutta. You can't, you get exasperated, you get everything. And this spirit of Calcutta made me survive both matrimony and a very disciplined service.
This is a great city, if I might end by saying that, the city of joy. I've always thought it's one of the great cities of the world, you know. If you look at London, Paris, Rome, Berlin, after that I would say Calcutta. It is a great city. And this, as you know, is a very compact city when you go around Calcutta. It's modeled on London. It was built by the British on the London pattern. And it's a wonderful city. It's a welcoming city. It's a very civil city. People are very decent here. If you want to find decency anywhere in India, it's here. Thank you very much, Mana. Thank you, Jawhar.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
Very kind of you.
And London, somebody else also wanted to make it London, but never mind.
Thank you so much. Now I want to request the director of Oxford Bookstore, Mrs. Mehna Bhagat, to say a few words.
It's a real pleasure to say more than a few words. And we are delighted to have you both here with us. We always you have given us, when you spoke about the idea of India, I was very reminded of our late colleague, Mr. Motwani. I don't know, some here may remember him because he was a legend and he used to tell us stories about the people who visited the store, the writers, and then we experienced partition. So we are the last generation who will really remember that bit of history. And this store will always carry that history with it. My father was a freedom fighter. When you spoke about the idea of India, those freedom fighters didn't fight for the India that seem to be heading towards. It's always very, very interesting for the common man, and I mean for anyone to have a close interaction with people who have served the government well, because that's how we learn. We see the inside story. We have hosted, I mean, over the years that I have been here, 23 years, we've had, politicians and authors, Dr. Karan Singh, Jaswant Singh, uh, they have all spoken here and we have learned so much from it. So we are at a very fast, crucial stage in our country, and you have added to our understanding of that. Thank you for sharing your views with us, and hopefully we will be able to decipher what is happening because it's very alarming. I was brought up, many of us were brought up with the very values that's like breathing, We live and act in that way. And when we see that being destroyed, it's very worrying. So, thank you so much for your insights. And I'm delighted. And both of you have served the country well, and you've shared with us.
Fact, mine is an allegation.
I'm glad you
I was very happy when he relocated from Delhi here. We first met when his son was a 19-year-old poet, and we had launched his poetry book here. So we love people who come back together and then add to it. And everything you said about Calcutta is right. Bubbles.
I was asking my sister-in-law, can you get me a little flat on rent in Alipur?
Yeah. And see, I'm not a Bengali, but I've lived here 50, 60 years. I love it, and I live here out of choice. We could have moved from here, my husband and me. But anyway, thank you so much for a lovely evening. And let's give them another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks for sparing the time.
Pleasure to have met you.